Three, test two, three, test two, three. Test two, three, test two, three. Test two, three, test two, three. Okay. So we are here with Loremaster James, and he is going to tell us a bit about everybody who lives in Middle Earth and how you can create some of those people who live in Middle Earth. So welcome back, James. How's it going?
It's good to be here, man. Yeah, it's going well.
Uh,
So life is good, and gaming is awesome. Yeah, man,
How's
it's a
your
great day.
how's your One Ring game going?
Oh man, the One Ring is just going phenomenal. We just had another game last night. We kind of play every 2 weeks, and so man, it's exciting. We started a new campaign. The previous died in the mountains of Mirkwood. They just got slaughtered there. They were foolish enough to go try to kill the werewolf, and they weren't that well prepared. So I quote one of my players after that campaign ended. He said, "I hate Mirkwood." So at the end of that group. So we kind of did a rewind in time. Went back to the year 2946. They played through "Don't Leave the Path." Made their way down to Woodland Hall, and then we decided to let one of the characters, as a dwarf, he had really developed his character, so he's very experienced. And so I come up with this idea: how about let's just backtrack on his tale of years and pretend that he did a lot of the things that he did early on, and let him be the seasoned character, mix up the party a little bit. Allow a seasoned character with some starting characters. So that's what we did, and it worked out awesome. It was really perfect. It didn't hurt the balance of the game at all. It was kind of like having a guy that everyone looked up to. His skills were advanced more. It wasn't like he was untouchable. It's just that he was a little better at everything, and he had some knowledge, and he knew some patrons, and he knew some places more than they had. It actually worked out really well in this game. It was not a balance problem at all. It was actually kind of relief. They could rely on him a little bit more, to help them out of these scrapes. So it was pretty cool. And then we played, wrote like a sequel to Of Leaves and Stewed Hobbit. Okay, I didn't want to play through that exactly. I wanted to do like a sequel. So I took just already done the things that were in that adventure. He'd already met the owners of the Easterly Inn. He'd already rescued Dindy Brandybuck one time, and so this was sort of, they were called back. His raven came to them in Woodland Hall and said, "Come to the Easterly Inn. There's trouble brewing. There's trouble brewing." And so they made a journey into the West Upper Vales, or the East Upper Vales, and they were able to get to the Easterly Inn, where they discovered they were going to have to go rescue poor Dindy one more time. This hobbit gets himself in trouble a lot. He's a rather reckless hobbit. So we're having an awesome time with it. It's been phenomenal.
That's awesome. So our topic for tonight is creating NPCs. There's three different ways of creating NPCs according to the Lore Master book. Do you use the three different methods for that, or do you have one preferred way that all your NPCs are? How do you do it?
Without reviewing, I can't remember exactly what the three are, but here's what I do. I like the pattern that this came up with for the supplement, The Heart of the Wild. I got that right here, and that's awesome. But I like what they did when they set a pattern in here, because basically they did this in The Heart of the Wild. They kind of give you a rundown of all the locations in Wilderland, and then they give you, notable places, notable characters. In the supplement, they decided that what's important is to come up with an attribute level, a couple of specialties, some distinctive features, just the relevant or skills that the NPC would have, and then basically an endurance score in case anything were to happen or whatever. So basically, with just those 5 elements, you can really create an NPC.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it, you can use your imagination and kind of make things up on the fly, or you could really develop this NPC, give them a whole backstory, and really kind of flesh them out a little bit. In fact, in the Heart of the Wild, they do give maybe 2-3 paragraphs for each NPC, telling you what their backstory is, but leaving enough there for any lore master to take and add to it, change anything to do, so it doesn't limit a lore master at all in what they're doing. So basically, that's what I do. So for my NPCs, I follow this pattern. So I create exactly that. I give them an attribute level. I give them some specialties, distinctive features, relative skills, and endurance score. And that's basically how I do it in my games. And I've used a lot of the actual NPCs as examples, the ones that the Cubicle 7s created. And I use them as examples of the types of characters that exist in Wilderland, kind of as a model. And I kind of follow that pattern a little bit. And so far it's been successful. I use it for inspiration, in other words. So yeah, that's how I do it. So for last night's game, there was a dwarf that he's a dwarven tinkerer, and he's come to the Easterly Inn, and he travels with a couple of companions, and this dwarven tinkerer actually follows and travels with another dwarf that is actually outlined in the Heart of the Wild. This is a dwarf trader named Fallen, and you can find that character in the Heart of the Wild. But I didn't take Fallen as the character, although he may show up in a future game. But I just created like this other guy that's with him, a little darker kind of dwarf, a greedier guy than Fallen. Fallen doesn't even realize what kind of greedy guy he has with, that he has with him. But this guy, call him Gimli, not Gimli, but Gimni, and he's got he's got dragon sickness. He likes to steal things. He's greedy of heart. He's cowardly in a big way. And so I just kind of created him. He's a suspicious guy, and of course, a greedy guy would be suspicious. He's stealing from everybody. He thinks everybody wants to take from him as well. He's kind of he deals with self-preservation. If someone else can die instead of him, that's okay with him. He's the guy that if two of you are running away from a bear, he's the guy that would use the strategy of just throw the bear some meat and let you be the one to be left behind.
Throw the hobbit under the bear.
Yep. So in last night's game, that's exactly what he did. He came across poor Dindy Brandybuck on the trail, and instead of telling the truth to poor Dindy, he gave Dindy a big bag full of treasure that he'd stolen from the goblins, and just gave it to him, telling him that it was a blessing. And then the dwarf ran on ahead, and Dindy thought nothing of it, thinking, "Wow, that was cool." We'll take the blessing. And then the goblins came along and saw that he had taken the treasure, that they thought Dindy took it, so he got captured. So oops. That's the kind of heart he has. So that's kind of how I make my NPCs.
Yeah, that's kind of the first way that they describe in the book of how to do it, is to use the distinctive features and the weaknesses to just describe the characters.
Yes. Yeah, you could do a lot of improvisation based just on a few. I'll give you an example. Like, let's take this. It's in Heart of the Wild, named Halbrick, the wine cellar. And, they give him, his distinctive features are merry and secretive, merry and secretive. And then he's got elven lore and trading, just by using those 4 words, you can kind of come up with a little bit of a character for him. You know, very happy, but he doesn't really reveal a whole lot about himself. You know, he doesn't tell secrets. He doesn't talk about himself, but he sure does like to be fun. You know, that kind of thing. You can kind of create your character that way. And he's into trading. So you imagine as a trader that is secretive, you know, he'd probably be very happy about his products and like to trade with you, but he probably doesn't reveal a whole lot about the products, you know, or how they got made or where they came from exactly, but happy to do what he's doing. So yeah, it's pretty, they give you a lot of room to play with in an NPC that way.
What other kind of merchants can you create to populate to meet along the road? What are your standbys?
In Wilderland, I think that dwarves are definitely a standby for me. Dwarves are a traveling folk anyway, so you can imagine this. They would be traveling possibly from the Iron Hills all the way to the Blue Mountains. Okay, that's a long stretch. But they throw, so one of the standard kind of characters that you might run into will be a traveling dwarf, maybe a trader, some kind of tinkerer, something like that you possibly run into. The other kinds of characters that you would see besides traveling dwarves are, you know, some of the cotters and some of the the farmers that you would find, especially around the Great River of Anduin, because there were a lot of Northmen that settled in the Anduin, and some of them didn't necessarily become part of the Bjornings. They didn't necessarily, you know, they're sort of the relatives of the woodmen, but they sort of stay around the river, and some of them have large rafts that they float upwards, you know, and they're going to trade in pottery, they're going to trade in furs, they're going to trade in animals, they're going to do all kinds of things that they're going to be a part of, but they're like these farmers and they have these homesteads and different things. So there's a lot of different folks like that you can meet when you're traveling through the wild. Now you're going to remember it's not a very populous area, so it's sort of, you could probably travel up and down the Anduin and never meet any of these people if you're not looking. Adventurers could do that, but it's fun every once in a while to have the adventurers go off, you know, into an area where they do discover these communities, albeit small communities. But then there's the, you know, the main farmer that everybody looks up to and respects, you know, runs things in that tiny little community in that area. And so you're going to see a lot of those types of folks.
Because it's kind of fun when they come back through that area to be like, hey, that's where Petra Drivelcup lives in that area. Let's go visit her.
Yes. Yeah. It's have the strange hermit types. You know, you might have that strange. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I lost your video, but that's okay. You might have some strange hermit types or people that are very odd in Wilderland. Like I know there's characters you could meet up that maybe some consider a witch. You know, some consider because they just had some odd tendencies. You know, or they came from a background maybe that live up in the Vales of Gundabad. You know, did not stay there, but they kind of wandered down a little bit, and they have some strange habits. You know, and they might know the language of wargs or whatever, but they're not fully, you know, they're not part of that community anymore. But they live out here in the wild. They've survived. So you can meet some really strange types that are kind of interesting.
How do you portray those people? How do you play them? Do you do Monty Python type voices for that, or how do you portray them without making them too crazy? Well, voices, but your portrayal.
Okay, so I like them to, you know, I kind of talk with a rough voice. You know, I have to just imagine I have a beard. I like to get into my characters a little bit, you know. I get in my beard. I'm a little, I pretend I'm a little bit surly, with my dwarves, and a little bit rough around the edges, and they kind of like to throw jokes around a little bit, but they're a little bit rough. I just I don't know. I just kind of imagine these characters in my mind as I see them. For hermits and witches or whatever, I kind of get this little voice like this, that talks, it's like, what are you doing out here? I've never seen your kind around here before. That kind of thing. And just sort of almost a cartoony kind of voice or whatever, just kind of strange, for farmers, just it's wildly varied. It depends on what their personality might be, but just come up with those things. I try to find distinct voices basically for each character that I create that would make sense, and I like to use voices in my games. I think it's a little bit shocking at first for the players because I really get into the bad guys, especially, the shadow creatures and whatnot. And my only regret with our little game that we had the other day when we were playing Nightmares of Angmar was that I didn't get to play, the main bad character. I didn't get to play him. I had to play the other ones. But I wanted to be the witch servant of Angmar. Isildt, it has been long since I've laid eyes on you. I would do that. I like really get into it. This wicked, evil character, and come and we will rule Angmar. The power shall rise. My daughter, you will be a queen in Angmar. Join me. Don't listen to these fools. Don't listen to these liars and beggars. They do not care for our folk. I just get into it big time. Make it very dramatic. And the players usually start chuckling a little bit because it just takes them back a little bit, but I try to inspire them to even play their characters. It just makes it that much more fun. It's so much more fun when you put something into it. And it's fun. So I try to give my characters a little bit of description like Tolkien would do. Its game, Gimli is this burly dwarf, very stout, a little more stout around the middle than anywhere else. And he wore himself a red hood and a wide leather belt, and his beard was long and braided, but tucked in. Different things that you want to describe to make it interesting, so they can kind of picture and imagine the kind of character that they're facing at the moment, and what they're doing. And while you're playing them and portraying them, remember to add some touches of humanity in there. Like in the game last night with the dwarves, he wasn't going to give up anything. But then when the player heroes encountered him and they were asking him for information about the location of Dindi, one of them rolled a riddle and rolled very well on a riddle score. And what I said was, well, Gimli wouldn't give anything up, but then his partner, Klim, his traveling dwarf partner, Klim, at that particular juncture couldn't take it anymore. And he says, Gimli, we must tell them all the truth. I'm ashamed to say we have left out details, and he had to go in there. So he had this remorseful spirit, remorse that they had lied and not told the full truth about what had happened on the path and what they had done. And it was sort of like this repentance moment for the dwarves, how they repent for their bad behavior. The Hobbit in jeopardy, and now he was captured and he's probably going to be made a sacrifice, but it just sort of make it dramatic like that. Add some touches. They can not only be angry, but they can have remorse. They can have happiness. They can have sadness. Add some emotion to the characters, and not just a flat. Here's the dialogue, and this is what do you do with that? Here's what they say. What do you say? Here's what they say. What do you say? Now add some drama to it. And give them some emotion, and those kind of things. It just makes it so much more interesting and. You're you're writing a play together, or you're making a movie together or something. Yeah.
How do you do that for the more standard characters? The typical bartender, the typical person hanging out at the old ford, characters that aren't well developed in the modules and things. How do you find the crux to them for portraying them?
Um, well, usually with an NPC, say they're at an inn, they're operating the tavern, they're milling about with the guests, whatever it may be, or like you said, they're just guardsmen at the old ford, like a Bjorning guardsman that's standing there at the or even at the Karak or whatever. So I would for these types of characters, I try to focus on the main thing, their main purpose. What is their main job? Because I feel like with them, that's what you want to get across, because there may not be a large these types, okay, but like, okay, just like in a movie, if you were going to set up a scene and you wanted the audience to understand who that character was, and you only had a frame or two to get that done, but it had to be very clear. I think of a stormtrooper. I mean, the stormtrooper outfit is designed and very distinct. When you see a stormtrooper standing there, you know what it's all about. You can just tell by the uniform itself, the way the character carries himself. It's just, okay, he's bad. He's part of a big regime. He looks mean. These guys are large and in charge. Don't mess with. That's an authority right there. So the same thing in the role-playing game, except you may only have a snapshot. You may only have a paragraph that you're either going to be able to say, or if you're improvising, few sentences that you're going to be able to do to really describe that particular NPC. And you may only have one piece of dialogue, so make it count. So if they're a guardsman, then it should probably have something to do with their job, what they're doing there, what their purpose is there. What would they say if they could only say one thing? What would they say to these player characters coming through? So you want to make them, if it's a guardsman, they're probably going to be a little more stern. They're going to be a little bit more wary of who's coming through and who's crossing. They're going to have a more authoritative voice to them, and they may only have a chance to say, "Who are you, and what business do you have here?" And then you may say, and they tightly grip their spear in their right hand as they stand at full attention, chest out, as they question you and leer at you with their eyes, never moving or glancing to the right or to the left, waiting for you, like that. And you just got a snapshot. Make them that if they leave with any impression at all, they'll leave with, "Dude, that guy was bad. He was a guardsman, man. He was ready for business if anything was going to happen." And that's all I had. Same thing with the bartender. It's if you're there, he's giving out beer, ale. He's having a good time, but he's obviously in charge of his inn or whatever it is. But he's here to service the guests. So you got to stick with what the main thing is. What is he here to do? And let the NPCs maybe, or the player heroes rather, if they want to get into it in more detail, let them lead that kind of the conversation, So the player characters will be, "Hey, what's going on? Have you heard anything lately? News around these parts or whatever?" And then maybe the innkeeper at that main thing which was to serve them and welcome them into a little bit more talking to the player characters as they would like to. And so yeah, it's kind of how I do it. So we kind of keep it brief with those NPCs. I really in my terminology, I really call those minor characters the NPCs. Really, in the game they call them Loremaster characters, but when I talk about Loremaster characters, I'm mainly talking about the characters that you would actually enter a formal encounter with. That to me, when I say Loremaster character, I'm thinking more in those terms. Although Loremaster character applies to all NPCs. NPCs means all Loremaster characters, that kind of thing. But there's a little bit between initial encounter with and the ones you're just going to carry on a conversation with without tolerance or anything like that.
For when you do a formal encounter, how do you carry that out to reveal information and portray the personality of the characters?
Okay, so this is a really good subject. First of all, because I think encounters are an element of the One Ring that the basic mechanics are there, but when it comes to actually playing it out at the table, probably every lore master may do it differently. And I don't know if there's no set formula for how necessarily that goes at a table. So the way that I have to deal with the lore master character is that you're going to use tolerance, you're going to use successes, you're going to use dice rolls, you're going to use the how to evaluate the outcome of the encounter. So you're going to count up successes, and then there's going to be extra rewards or boons depending on how well the player characters did. If you're going to use the rules, then I find you got to make things interesting with that lore master character too. It pays to write it out. It pays to put some things on paper in advance. And what I like to do, this is what I do. I write out the encounter where I say, here's the encounter goal. So say the main goal is to gain trust, right? Say you're dealing with King Thranduil because you have a favor to ask of him. That's the main goal of the encounter, is to gain trust and ask a favor. All right. So that's the main goal. They're going to go through all their introductions. They're going to go through all their interactions. They're going to make appropriate rolls for that. But during that, there are things that they are going to say or respond or however that is going to be sort of these are the influencing questions. These are the influencing statements that they're making toward the encounter goal. So if the goal was to gain trust, they may say something like, King Thranduil, we come to you humbly. We recognize the sovereignty of your realm. We appreciate that you take care of the forests, and that we respect all life here, and we respect your sovereignty in regards. We haven't hunted on your lands without permissions, and blah, 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 blah. And they keep going. They're trying to build trust. That would be kind of an influence role. And they may make a role of courtesy, a role of persuade there, maybe even a role of inspire there, to talk about how they can be trusted because they respect King Thranduil. Well, that to me is kind of an influence role. They'd make a roll. You would count those up. Those successes to me would count toward what they're going to receive as a reward at the end, right? Because during the encounter, the goal, if you look at evaluating the encounter, if you get a successful encounter, you get what you came for, but no more. So everything that you're counting as successes, those should be pertinent to the goal. But we all know things that are said during an encounter that don't directly deal with about, they may talk about other things that just come up spontaneously. They may ask questions that they're not dealing with the goal, but just for information's sake, or they're trying to share, or they're trying to build relationship or whatever it may be, but they're really not directly related to what they came for.
Like Thranduil asking for news outside his realm.
Yeah, something like that. So to me, I think you have to be prepared in advance during the encounter. Get well portrayed. You have to get maybe some statements in advance that Thranduil would say, and then you have to get some information possibly that Thranduil would reveal. So what would he possibly say to these player characters? What would he possibly reveal? And these things have nothing to do with the boons that are going to come at the end. These are just things that may come up in the course of conversation, and be prepared for some of those things. So it's in the crafting of those statements, things that he might say, things that he might ask, things that he might reveal. In the crafting of those statements, you're building character, because they're hearing how he thinks, they're hearing his opinions, they're hearing the kinds of questions that would be important to him. They're building inferences from those things. So the character of Thranduil is being developed in those prepared statements. So I think that's really, for someone to do that with improvisation, I think you would have to be very well versed, perhaps, on what who the Elven King is and what he's all about. You'd have to really prepare yourself in advance as the character that he is. I just find preparation a lot more helpful when it comes to lore master characters that you're encountering, because there's a lot of color you can add to creations when you prepare in advance. And it's consistent.
As well as past experiences with the characters.
Yeah. Right. You can go back and you can remember those previous encounters and those kind of things and bring consistency to the game. So when they do go back and visit Thranduil, he has the same, he's got the same type of character that he had before. He's got the same type of answers and the same type of concerns and the same, some things may change, but if they did change, it made sense, and you can also provide explanation. Last we met, this is how I felt, young adventurers, but now I have changed my mind.
Or even some secrets, like Alpha Mirkwood is fallen for one of Thranduil's guards. And they might think that Thranduil knows, but Thranduil plays that card during the encounter, that he knows about that and is holding them accountable.
Yeah.
So how do you reveal the information that is in the module? Do you have that at the end? Do you reveal that throughout the encounter, or how do you reveal it?
You mean information, secrets?
The successes, information by successes.
Okay, so, well, normally, like, if you read a lot of the adventures in Tales from Wilderland, you look at those, you look at the rewards for the encounters, a lot of that information is something that can be revealed immediately. It's because it gives them clues for the upcoming events. It'll tell them, it'll give them clues. For example, you could encounter a lore master character who reveals to you the secrets of a location that they're headed toward, and because they succeeded at that level in the encounter, that character then revealed it's better to go right than to go left, and for this reason. And without them having gotten to that point, they would have never known that, and it would have been a 50-50 chance. When they get to that place, it just wouldn't have known any different, those player heroes, but they would have chose either right or left. But if they hadn't got that information before, choosing left might have been a big problem. You know what I mean? But because they got that information before, it's not only information they get, but it could also be literally rewards. I have in one of my adventures, the player heroes are encountering a cobbler. He's in Lake Town. He likes to make shoes. He's gone out and he's found some herbs out in the lands next to the lake, and he's found some herbs that provide healing. And so he's created what are called healing shoes. And during this encounter, if the player heroes do so well, he likes them so much, he gives them a pair of healing shoes. And it actually, it lowers their fatigue as long as they're wearing the shoes, and then after so many days, it wears off, it would have to be reapplied or whatever. So, but fatigue gets lowered from these healing shoes. I just made those up completely, but I had fun, creating that. But then in there, it's kind of like, I think of Galadriel, when the Fellowship met with Galadriel, that was a successful encounter. She gave every one of them a special gift, So they all had a prized possession given by Galadriel. So I think most of the time, that information they get in the encounter is it can be revealed right away. I'm trying to think of an instance where I kept it a secret from them. They did so well, but then only later would they learn, or that information would get revealed because they did that. In last night's game, there's kind of an example of that. When they had an encounter with the dwarves in the Easterly Inn, it was like, depending on how well they did, even more information that the dwarves were holding out on them, the better they did, the more of that information they were to get, okay? And the information that they would receive actually had two purposes of advantage for them. The first was an obvious one to them. By hearing this information, now all of a sudden they knew that they could be, better prepared for whatever was coming, okay? Or that their tactics would change because they knew this information. But what they didn't know were the exact bonuses mechanically. They didn't know the exact advantages they were gaining. Actually, then I went back and said, it was precisely because you learned this information that this is the actual bonus you guys are going to get, because you've decided to take this particular action based on the knowledge you had. So I still kind of left it up to them. So on one hand, it benefited them directly because they had the information, but it was up to them to decide what to do with the information. And if they did the right thing with the information, then I revealed what the real bonus was. So that's kind of an example, a little bit of what you're talking about, I think, with not revealing everything right then and there. Yeah.
Right, instead of doing an info dump paragraph.
Yeah, I think another example of what you're talking about could be, let's take the adventure Words of the Wise. Remember that adventure?
Oh, yes.
That was that was an adventure written by Dominic McDowell. Just a phenomenal way to teach the One Ring, because it had all three. It had a combat, a journey, an encounter, another combat at the end. It was amazing. But in any case, in that adventure, the player heroes go from the Woodland Hall. They go all the way to King Thranduil. What they're trying to do is get King Thranduil to send a war band. Okay? And they want him to send a war band all the way back to Woodland Hall, because if the orcs are attacked, and spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't played Words of the Wise, but they're trying to get all the way back to Woodland Hall. If the orcs were to overrun Woodland Hall, they could possibly steal a secret weapon, and that would change the fate of Wilderland. Okay, so player heroes have to go convince Thranduil of the importance of getting involved in what's going down with the Woodmen. That particular encounter with Thranduil, you could, as a lore master, if they succeeded the highest, if they got an extraordinary success on that encounter, like they racked up so many successes, you don't have to reveal to them right away that Thranduil himself is going to come with the warband. You could simply say that Thranduil agrees that the importance is it's a great matter of importance, and he agrees enough that he says the elves should definitely check this out. And he says, go on back, and in a few days, expect to hear from us. Something like that. And then you could make it a surprise, once they got back to Woodland Hall, saying the elves are apparently coming, or whether something's happening, but then have Thranduil show up himself until it happens. So that's a way you could surprise them with it done with an encounter.
Excellent.
Later.
Excellent. Anything else on NPCs, or you want to talk about encounters?
I would just mention one more thing about the kinds of NPCs that you can encounter in Wilderland. Your non-typical, it's not a heroic culture type of NPC. So, for example, you can encounter creatures in the wild that could also be NPCs, not necessarily a race like elf men, dwarves, woodmen, bjornings. You can also encounter giants. You can encounter
spiders,
enchanted trees. You can count talking spiders. There's all kinds of things that you may actually encounter that you could consider an NPC in Wilderland. And you know what? The sky's the limit. I mean, Tolkien only said the wild is the wild, and there's all kinds of things in the wild. He didn't describe everything, so you just never know what kind of creature you can come upon in the wild. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, following Sauron. It could be a neutral type of character of some sort, or even good. You may encounter a good creature of some kind, that maybe something in Wilderland is, akin to a Tom Bombadil, or or something like that. Something mysterious, some creature that's mysterious that you find the way, but not necessarily getting involved. Gandalf or Bjorn or something, you know. So, yeah, of course.
I can't wait for somebody to write an encounter with Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, well, you can find one in Ruins of the North. Yep.
I forgot about
There was an encounter
that.
with Tom Bombadil in Ruins of the North. Yeah, in one of the adventures. Yeah, I believe CS wrote it. It's actually pretty good. Makes it so fun because he puts in, you know, rhymes and everything. It's very token-esque. And
Cool.
I'm sure the license, the lawyers for the license and everything probably loved it when they read that, because they absolutely. I think that Cubicle 7 puts in major characters from the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit into the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's the spirit of the license, is to really use the material, you know, and so I think they love it when you put those characters in there, as long as you stay true to them, you know, true to the characters in the books. They love it. So yeah, I like that you're going to use Gandalf. I like that you're going to use some major characters from the Lord of the Rings in your game.
Yeah,
I
but
think
not use them not to overshadow the PCs, not to, as heavies.
Yeah, but kudos to you for doing that, because a lot of guys, it's so easy just to sort of, you know, just do their own thing or kind of play down. But use those characters, honor those people. They're wonderful, and they're everybody. It's so evocative of Lord of the Rings. Your players are gonna love it. They're gonna, yeah, we talked with Gandalf. Oh man, he showed up, you know, or whatever.
Bilbo hired us.
Yeah, that kind of thing. It's amazing. They'll like it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, James. And you have a wonderful month, and we'll talk to you next time about more One Ring.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right, you take care.
Take care.
All right.